because I really have a great job. It's fun, it's exciting, it's challenging, but sometimes very difficult. And I think for me, part of the challenges and the difficulties amongst the fun is ensuring that this legacy continues and ensuring that this legacy continues to be the barometer that guides us all as South Africans as we chart into the new spaces that confront us daily, because life is not static. And the challenges that OR dealt with in those times, as Thami said, in that epoch, the tactics that he used simply become a lesson and a guide for us, but it's important that we understand that we can but only interpret it and use it to the relevance of today. Storytelling is as good as you take it and you use it to improve your conditions at that particular time. And that is part of the mandate that we have as a foundation. Our role has been to ensure that this rich legacy remains accessible to as many people as possible, not only South Africans, but to the continent itself. And I guess when we get into questions and answers, we would even talk more about the role he played in the continent. In as much as he was fighting for our liberation in South Africa, he fought for the collective liberation of the African continent and the African people. So even as he asked for help from different countries, it is also about what he gave back to them. But it went beyond the continent. It is the work also that he did beyond the continent internationally as he mobilized support. And that continues to be our job, our mandate, and ensuring that it is also interpreted correctly. And you probably agree with me that the best way is to always even listen to the people that engaged with him. Personally, I never met OR. I read about OR a lot as a young student activist with very big ideas and thinking we can sort out life very easily. Somehow, I don't know if I was unfortunate or fortunate to have had my home in the former Bophuthatswana Bantustan. So you can imagine the type of double the apartheid forces that came on us. The then president used to behave like he owns us. He told us we are his people. He will dictate whether you breathe or don't breathe. And if you breathe the wrong way, he would immediately take out all the privileges that he gave you because they were his personal privileges. And you can understand that kind of a system. So I largely read about OR, but also encountered him very strongly in the songs that we sang in those days to give us more motivation and energy to continue with whatever small battle. We thought it was a bigger battle then, but when you look at the kind of battle he led, it's far bigger than anyone could have understood. So I draw my inspiration from that, and I really feel privileged to today be working for his foundation. And we definitely are purely a custodian, but a platform that needs to be accessed by all of us. So if our wish goes well, we would love to see, in my old language, would say, we want to see a footbike forming between you and the foundation, which means you'd be treading that road up and down to engage with us, to give us more, for us to give you more, so that South Africans and the world over never forget, so that as we struggle with new challenges, we can draw from him. And one particular good set of guide that we can take for him, it's the set of values that he lived by. I think if you listen to the anecdotes that we heard, he was a very committed person to humanity. He loved his people, and he was an amazingly dedicated hard worker to the fault of his own health. He believed strongly in honesty, in integrity, and he was very selfless because he simply gave of himself, but he was also very courageous. And I think we would see also as we engage how courageous he was in working through the media to continue the struggle that was waged against apartheid. So I believe that as a foundation, we continue to see the media as a partner, because as we interpret his legacy, we can best rely on the media to be part of sharing and spreading that lesson, and also sometimes countering the misconception of the past as though it was the best and most ideal space, and also as though the people that existed then were like angels and saints and never at fault. because they too also learned from their mistakes and strengthened whatever they were doing by using their mistakes to improve, but not using their mistakes to continue to be arrogant and difficult to listen and change. So I think in opening this for us, that's what we represent as the foundation. And the only best thing we can do is to continue to unearth amazing people that knew him very well, but also continue to motivate people like me who never met him but were inspired by him, and those that never even knew of him, so that out of him they realize that anything is possible. And his story life is the best story life that can inspire, literally. If you go through that long storyline, you'd find that privileged people, underprivileged people, poor people, rich people have a lot to learn from his ethics and values. And if we do that, we would be a better country and serve him well for the sacrifices that he made for our collective freedoms. Thank you, Willie.
Good evening. Thank you, Will, for the wonderful opportunity to share this moment with you, and there's a great panelist here. As I'm listening to people talk about OR, and obviously I've never met OR and I know very little about him, I'm filled with a number of questions about what influenced him. Thami talks about leaders being born by epochs. And I wonder if it's not the other way around. Leaders that create epochs that lead us to where we are. We are talking about A. Moses here, the creator of this great republic we have, with a wonderful constitution he never experienced. Could he have been a creator of the epoch, not being created? I'm thinking as a free journalist in South Africa. Often we complain, we operate like sitting ducks who get attacked by the Andile Mngatamas and other rogue personalities out there. It does appear as if the South African media is not free, and we as SANEF hold the view that the South African media is very, very free. Although there are threats to the freedoms that we enjoy coming from a whole lot of fronts, the legislative framework, the governing party often talks about the idea of a media appeals tribunal. There's a hate crimes bill coming up. Whilst we're not opposed to a new legislation to deal with the issue of hate crimes, as a matter of principle, we do want to caution about some of the provisions of the law where people who redistribute pieces in the media, they could be cartoons, and they could end up being jailed for the things they do. So this is one of the threats that comes out of the legislative framework. But by and large, we are a free society, and we are grateful to people like OR who created this wonderful country. I heard earlier that Sis Pumla is coming from Tanzania, a great country to which we owe our freedoms. When people mention them, and there's wonderful cities and towns over there, whether it's Morogoro or Dar es Salaam, you tend to have a special part of you being moved by the importance of the kind of history we share with a place like Morogoro, which hosted one of the important events of the ANC, is the evolution of the number of epochs that were created by leaders like Tambo. Tanzania is even more important to me because only the other day they shut down the A newspaper that was critical to the president, who was hailed as a breath of fresh air when he came into power, the man they call the bulldozer. But now he's showing us a number of colors we don't expect from Democrats. So we are proud as a South African, part of the South African press and media to enjoy the freedoms that our fellow Africans in places like Tanzania and Cameroon do not enjoy, because in Cameroon you find journalists being sent to jail. So you wonder if, as Africans, we are experiencing a wave of democratization, or we're experiencing another wave of a liberation struggle, where Africans have to fight to protect their rights. Protect their rights when we're finding dark arts being a key strand of a political communication and propaganda, as we have experienced in South Africa with the role played by the likes of the Bell Pottinger crowd. This is the kind of communication that we're experiencing right now, which is totally different from the ideals articulated here that OR Tambo stood for. You also wonder if we do realize the context within which we locate a communication in the era of OR Tambo. OR Tambo is often mentioned and painted as somebody who was an internationalist. But for what? During his leadership of the ANC during the exile era, he is credited for creating a very, very powerful and strong wave of international solidarity, going to the UN, getting the good agreement and the recognition of apartheid as the terrible crime against humanity it was. So communication was not communication for the sake of it, and neither was the internationalization that he spread and preached. As a free journalist, I wonder if I'm experiencing and using all these opportunities that are provided in South Africa to do what I'm supposed to do as a journalist, helping right now South Africa with the democratization process. I wonder how Tambo would deal with a number of issues that are linked to the democratization process. Part of the democratization process is democratic consolidation, which is about the creation of a multi-party democracy where democracy is seen as the only game in town. How would he feel about some of the things that get said in our parliament by our government when our government displays traits that are not in line with the values of our constitution? Often, the things that come off our leaders' mouths are a direct threat to media freedom. I wonder if, as journalists, we realize the power that we have in creating a new epoch. I still want to know who OR Tambo read and was influenced by. Often we forget that there were great writers, black writers, at different epochs in South Africa, and they created other epochs. Sol Plaatje gets credited with a wonderful line he used about being a pariah in his own land, a journalist. Tio Soga, the guy who crafted the beautiful, beautiful hymn, Lizali Sitting Alako. Dr. Khubusana. I've come across the works of the Jolobes, the Jabavus. Are we really living up to the opportunities that are there as journalists of this era, an era created by OR Tambo? Thank you.
It's not possible that media is itself using self-censorship and is not covering certain things. And therefore, by its very nature, undermining the freedom that it is supposed to be enjoying. Let me give you an example. And I probably speak under correction, but where I stand, I don't know if any one of us here has come across an analytical article about white monopoly capital. What is white monopoly capital in South Africa? There are a lot of views that are being expressed about white monopoly capital, but I haven't understood, I haven't come across a media house analyzing, let's say, monopoly capital and also white monopoly capital. Is monopoly capital a color-coded thing? Is black monopoly capital going to be different from white monopoly capital? I don't know. We haven't dealt with that. There is a concept that is being bandied about, radical economic transformation. What is that? What is radical economic transformation? Sanef, I don't know, maybe you could tell me How do we analyze that radical economic transformation? To extend it a little bit further, I'll also go maybe into forbidden territory. At one point in time, President Zuma was addressing a gathering in KwaZulu-Natal. I'm not going to quote him verbatim, but he actually quoted Marx. He quoted Marx in a particular way, and the audience applauded. And that was an incorrect quotation of Marx. If you want me to tell you what the quotation was, phone me. I'll give you the exact quotation and the correct quotation from Marx. But the media never picked it up. They never picked it up. To what extent is our media sufficiently informed and educated about these issues?
I see Sam would like to respond.
Yeah?
I see Sam.
All right, let me. South Africa and nationalization. There was a discussion about nationalization, and the ANC maintained that nationalization is not a policy of the ANC. But when Nelson Mandela was released, the first thing that he said it is impossible that we can resolve the problems of South Africa without nationalizing the height. That's what the Freedom Charter says. But I haven't heard the media interrogating that. Illicit capital outflows.
You stopped short. He said it's impossible to address these challenges without nationalization. Unless you provide me with an alternative to nationalization and appeal to business to do that. And business said, we will respond to that, we'll come up with empowerment and so on.
But how do...
been enough.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then decolonization of education. What are we talking about? What is decolonization of education? Whose responsibility is it to teach us? I know. If you ask me, I know. I'll tell you what I think decolonization of education is. But all what I'm saying is the media has restricted itself to certain areas and territories, and it is not interrogating the challenges, or at least in my view, that I feel are confronting South African society.
Sam?
Thank you very much. I mean, it's wonderful to sit next to somebody who really consumes the South African media. I mean, Thami starts with the example of the BP oil spill down in America, and he forgets to tell you that. He knows this through the South African media. He also forgets to tell you that there have been consequences for that, starting with the dismissal of the CEO of BP. The number of anecdotes he really uses in making this argument. You see, a trick with dealing intellectuals is one. We tend to be academic in the true sense of the word, where we must discuss and give a lot of airtime and space to sophistry, which is radical economic transformation and all the slogans the people like who spend time with politicians and intellectuals like him want us to believe. So I do take the criticism that he's talking about of a media that doesn't cover some aspects and some aspects that he personally wants the media to cover. The risk, though, is listening to a consumer that he is, telling you what it is that you ought to be covering. I mean, that's dangerous, and it's basically worse than what he's calling for. Thank you.
Can I say something?
Can I respond to this one?
One small thing, because it is directed at me.
Wait, Thami.
Before you respond, we just have to give our other members of the audience also a chance.
One small thing.
I think I'm gonna
No,
defend
one small thing. I am amazed that you can come to the assumption that my only source of information is South African media. And that is incorrect.
Okay.
But what I wanted to say, Sam, that we should really look at it very seriously and retrospectively. And we shouldn't miss that what Thami said, that self-censors that we have as South African media. And that self-censorship that we are going through, it is both ways. Because we are intimidated to tell the truth. We tend to want to massage the truth in our reporting. I think we should manage that. That's one. But the other one is to run away from this thing that necessarily bad news sells. And the strategic focus is on bad news when the good news is it's also there. So that's self-censorship that you must deal with both extremes of censoring ourselves because we are fearful of the repercussion of our discussion to those who are wielding too much power. And I think we should challenge that as the media. That's